Hearty welcome, Dr. L. Subramaniam, Ms. Kavita Krishnamurthy. Dear friends, very good morning to all of you. I today have this great honor to be interviewing this legend of not just Indian music or Indian violin, but the world music and world violin, I would say. Very hearty welcome to the city of letters, city of literature, Kozhikode. I would like to start off by referring to you as a person who has made bridges, as many have commented, bridges between Carnatic music and Hindustani music, between Indian music and Western music. I would say if you look at history, that is a very tall challenge to create such a bridge, because there is a whole universe between the West and the East as far as culture is concerned. So we'd like to hear how you were capable of, or how you thought about such a very, very big landscape of bridging. What were your motivations, and how do you, when you look back, what do you think about it?
Namaste and good morning to everybody. Thanks for a very kind introduction about me. Whenever we talk about Indian music earlier in 1900s, particularly violin was treated as an accompanying instrument. So either we played with somebody, vocalist or veena player or etc. etc. So my father's dream was to transform this almost into a solo status like Lord Menuhin and big orchestras where the violinists were playing in the biggest concert hall. He also wanted to hear Carnatic violin, Indian violin in those kind of situation. Then he realized there's a big gap in technical and innovations which were not in the West. The violin was already, even an average student had a better technique than some of our most known violinists because they were accompanying techniques. There are two different techniques. Once you play with somebody accompanying them, it's a different technique. You have to basically support them, know the composition, which the main singer or other main artists are performing, and support them. Then you don't develop much of technique virtuosity. So his dream was to bring the violin, so he developed a lot of techniques sitting in Jaffna. He got a job there. Then that was his dream, my father, Professor Lakshminarayan's dream. So that I got fascinated by. I thought how we can bring not only the violin, also our music, connect to different global stages. So I initially started doing jugalbandis with people like Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, Bismillah Khan Sahab, and duets with Alaraka ji, and a lot of very well-known North Indian artists. We started the trend of jugalbandis to connect, first of all, south to north within India, because many of the major North Indian festivals those days very rarely had South Indian artists. But in South, we had definitely representation of the North. So it was like first to cross that bridge. This was the earliest bridge which we started building, doing a lot of concerts with the famous North Indian artists, including Pandit Jasraj. The last many concerts we did was with Pandit Jasraj and things like that. Then to connect with the West, I had an opportunity because once Lord Menuhin, both of us were supposed to play in the United Nations to celebrate the 40th year of India's independence. So he was supposed to play alone and I was supposed to play alone at two different sets. And he asked me, why don't you write a piece, we'll play it together. So I wrote a composition. So that was one of the major bridges we did with the West classical musician. In the Western classical system, they thought our music was ethnic or folk music, primarily because we were sitting down and playing technically different. So always they referred to our music as part of the world music in a bigger carpet, whereas classical music was only Western classical music. They used to call it Occidental music, as you know. So whenever they say Occidental music, it is classical, only Western classical. Everything else was put under one carpet as world music. So I used to literally, in every television, every newspaper interviews, I used to say, our classical system is probably one of the most oldest systems in the history. And just because we are sitting down and playing, it doesn't mean we are playing folk music or ethnic music. We do have different folk ethnic style. Literally, each state have different folk music, different ethnic music, different styles we have. Plus, majorly South Indian classical music was the original music which developed from Vedas around 12th, 13th century because of the Mughal invasion. It developed, taking some of the Persian influences, became South Indian Carnatic, and the North Indian developed. So we have two classical systems, I used to tell them. So, but the collaboration, the second bridge was with playing with people like Lord Menuhin and some of the greatest violinists and orchestras. If sometime we can play that Menuhin short clipping, if it is there. That was the first with a classical Western musician, where he also very openly said this is one of the most sophisticated classical musical system.
Great. Is the audio ready for play? Is the audio system ready? Okay, we'll go on. As you pointed out, the West used to look at Indian classical music from a colonial eye, I would say. But even now I wonder, for example, you take the basic scales in both the systems. The distance between the two, between sa re ga ma pa da ni sa and sa re ga ma pa da ni sa, I think between them there is a whole world altogether. I am wondering, as a person who knows both the musical systems, what does our gamaka sound to an ear of a Western classical musician? Would they be able to appreciate the aesthetics of it? Or would they think that here is somebody who is drunk playing the notes with a lot of oscillation? What would they be thinking? I am wondering what your take is.
Some people who are drunk will think this is a drunk music, but a sophisticated audience, when you go deeper into music, doesn't matter what music it is. Ultimately, the feeling, emotion, and the soul of the notes, that's what we try to communicate to the person who is on the other side. Our system, as you said, is based on 22 shrutis, whereas they have 12 tones in an octave. So for their convenience, because they have harmony, they have used the tempered system. For them, the vertical motion of clusters of note playing together, creating harmony, was their focus. Whereas we have 72 parent scales derived from that minimum over 2 million derived scales. And we can go on creating new ragas, using new microtones, new development from different parent scales. So our flexibility, our improvisational ability to do things, we are far ahead in that sense.
So your book on raga harmony, I mean, this is a record of the fusion of the two cultures. So in this book, you have mentioned that even a classical musician, Western classical musician who does not really know about gamakas or the Indian system can still take part in this and enjoy. So would that mean we have a lighter version of the Indian classical music fused into the raga harmony? Or do you think that we have not been able to infuse the whole glory of the Indian music into raga harmony?
I think the whole concept of raga harmony was developed because when I was traveling in Moscow, at that time I have written a piece called Fantasy on Vedic Chants, which was based on our Vedic chants. It's a major orchestral piece. Zubin Mehta, Maestro Mehta asked me to write a piece for the New York Philharmonic. So there I want to do the piece completely based on all our ragas, especially the last movement based on Ragamalika, where we in a Ragamalika we play different ragas one after another, come back to the main theme. So with that concept and also with the polyrhythm, our Nadai, Tisram, Kandam, Misram, Sankirnam, Chatusram, all the Nadai is based, the composition was completely based on Indian concept. When I played it for both our presidents were there, our president and Russian president were there, I was asked to play that piece. There I met the chairman of the head of the Moscow Conservatory. So he came and asked me, all the harmony, we are not familiar, but it is yet powerful and very moving. Can you write a thesis on that? I'll give you a doctorate if you stay here for maximum 6 months. You sit with me, you write it, and we will do some composition together and play. I'll immediately give you a doctorate. I said thank you because its temperature at that time was minus 35 in Moscow. So I said I'll rather go back immediately. But that put a seed. So subsequently, whatever I did, major orchestra, I've done more than 25 symphonic pieces, played hundreds of concerts with major orchestras. That thought, sort of somebody who doesn't have an opportunity to go abroad and learn Western music, then there should be a shortcut of knowing your own tradition strongly and trying to write for orchestras. Because in between what happened was some of the people, they wrote some Indian melodies, made a Western arranger to arrange. So that whenever we write a piece thinking of a raga, if somebody plays a note which doesn't belong to the raga, immediately it gets jarring. We say, oh, it's not okay. So a Western arranger, he won't know about the raga. You just give a melody, according to the Western sense, he will use any note which is suitable to create the harmony. So I thought I will do the book so that it will be beneficial for all the future generation of composers who, if they don't get an opportunity to go abroad or learn harmony or visit or learn from somebody else harmony, everything, this will be a shortcut to write major orchestral pieces. But yet, it's very important to have your own roots very solid. Somebody have to have one root very solid. Then we have to understand the other root. The trick thing about the Western writing is like when you have a full symphony orchestra, there are different sections. Woodwind sections like flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon. Then we have brass section, French horn, trumpet, trombone, different, plenty of instruments are there. So one has to know what line will sound nice to that instrument, their range. When you combine everything, you want the melody to be heard and the harmony to be back, not the harmony jumping out, the melody underneath. So all those, the finesse, it will help if they also know the orchestration.
When I was asked to come and speak along with you, I was hoping that you would bring your violin so that we would have a phrase played. But happily, even though that hasn't happened, happily you have brought some videos of yours. One I understand playing with the great Yehudi Menuhin. I recall Lalgudi Jayaraman also visiting him and playing.
I think Menuhin played with Ravi Shankar.
Oh.
Then after that he played with me.
Oh.
After that we toured a lot. He didn't record with anybody else. Only
I
these
see.
two recordings are there.
Oh, okay.
And
so
earliest,
we'll hear that, or is that?
Yeah, please.
So we'll go on to speak until it comes up.
Yeah. So I met Menuhin because he was doing yoga and was very interested in Indian culture.
He was connected to Indian culture positively.
Indian culture.
Yeah.
So they had a very big celebration of Menuhin's birthday in Bonn, celebrating his 70th birthday, where the Helmut Kohl, all the German television, everybody was there.
Yeah.
So he asked me whether I can play pure Indian classical South Indian music. That was the first time a South Indian music was played in that stage for Menuhin. Immediately after I finished playing, he came to the stage and said we should do something together.
Oh.
But at that time, I thought Menuhin being Menuhin, he belongs to my father's generation, one of the greatest musicians of all time, basically saying to make me, comfortable and happy.
Okay.
But when we were asked to play in the UN, immediately he said, why not we play together? So I have to write something, but I wrote something based on our Mohanam.
Oh.
Completely based on Mohanam raga, pentatonic scale, which is one of our most common ragas, which everybody knows who have heard Carnatic music.
Yeah. Also one of your favorites, I suppose.
Yes.
Along with many others.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So I wrote that piece in Mohana raga, and he played beautifully. If you see that, without knowing Indian music, the concept or emotion, he could understand the musicality of that. So when we played, we did a trade-off and we played.
So did he use gamakas when he played, or would he use straight notes?
I wanted him to use the vibrato so that we can do the segregation of our gamakas and the difference between Indian tonality and Western tonality.
Oh.
So I requested him to use his straight Western improvisation technique and vibrato and things like that. Whereas I did all my thing. But clipping is the fast section of the thing, not the earlier thing.
Organizers, please come forward and tell me whether it is ready. Maybe we will go on with one more question. Um, Violin in Indian music is maybe about 180 years old, and we understand that it is the great Muthuswami Dikshit's brother who first learned to use it in Indian style, and then Vadivelu learned it from him and he brought it to Trivandrum, and the king of Trivandrum, Swadhitirunal, was very great proponent of it. He made a ivory violin and gifted it to Vadivelu and made it in Trivandrum. It was immediately made a accompaniment for Carnatic music in place of Veena. I've also heard Chaudhaya, T. Chaudhaya, claiming that violin has an Indian origin, and he cites a relief in a temple in Tamil Nadu where a sculpture shows a person playing violin. Would you agree that we have adapted it so beautifully that its European origin doesn't really matter? We have our own fingering, our own, the way that we place the violin, everything is very unique, that the origin is actually irrelevant. And would you agree to that statement?
Yeah, two things. Much earlier, there are sculptures with violin-shaped string-board instrument, and also they believe during Ravana's time he played something called bovalin, some instrument which is a primitive predecessor of string-board instrument. There have been string-board instruments all over the world in different format. If you go to different countries, with whatever locally available, they have made something string-board instrument. Sometimes even now you see in Tamil Nadu on the street, they call it Kotangachi violin, which is like with coconut shell. They put a paper and put a little bridge, and sometimes they play so beautifully the film songs with one string. So the string board technique has been there in different tradition in India before. The sophisticated form of the modern violin was taken by Balaswami Dikshit, because I think one of his supporters who was supporting Dikshit's family, they took him to Chennai, so they heard a British group of people playing the violin. Because it is a stringed board instrument without fret, you can slide, you can play microtones, because whenever there's a fret, there's certain limitation. When you touch, then you hit the fret. If you pull, you can get a microtone. But whereas in the violin, absolutely there's no fret, clear fingerboard. So you can slide any extension. Plus also being a board instrument, you can sustain a note even longer than voice can sustain if you train yourself. So this way, if you see violin, it is all over the world. If anybody plays an open string in the violin, nobody can say what tradition it is. But the violin is there in the Western orchestras, more than 40% is stringed instrument. If you go to Norway, there's a Norwegian folk violin. If you go to Greek, there's the Iraq and all the there are Middle Eastern violins. Sometimes they play the violin upside down, playing like that. So this violin has been there all over the place, but is extremely suited for Indian music, because we can also beautifully play the microtones and the ornamentation and gamakas and everything. That flexibility is there.
You're ready? You're ready? So the first one we are playing is...
The first one is the Lord Menuhin, the first collaboration of with this very great classical Western violinist. So this brought Indian violin to also to a classical status. Otherwise they thought we were playing ethnic, they were playing classical.
When it is ready, just let us know. I've watched some of your performances in the non-Indian arenas. And one thing I found most striking was in Oman, the Royal Orchestra, it is called. Symphony, yeah. And there are two things very surprising that I noticed. One was that our knowledge is that, Islamic countries, music is not really at the center of their culture. But in that symphony, we find that women who are dressed in traditional Islamic headgear, they are playing instruments, and a large number of them, beautifully dressed, are there in that symphony. And you landed at the center of it and rained Indian ragas. I found that as something like placing Indian music in the center of world music, because that looked to me like world music, because this people from Oman were there. There were, of course, there were Westerners there, and the whole thing was a mix of culture, mix of ethnicity, and you were right at the center, and you were, you know, in the traditional style, sitting and playing along with the mridangam. And I thought that was crowning glory for your violin career, you know, like most crescendo point where, you know, you were at the center of the whole world music performance. Can you share your experience with this Oman performance?
Before that, I have done with some of the major orchestras like London Symphony, the New York Philharmonic, Swiss Romand, and different major orchestras, South Africa and places like that. Coming to Oman, that royal, the king was very, very fond of Western classical music. So he has trained, he brought some British people to train the local people to play all the instruments and created a symphony orchestra. Then they wanted me to come and play my own composition and perform with them. So when I landed there, I never thought, like what you said, it was a big surprise for me. Usually not only they don't play music, but also ladies taking part in those kind of things. I was not very sure, I was not aware of it. When I went there, in the rehearsal, there were a lot of ladies playing with the traditional dress, and although the red and the scarf were beautifully done. So we had a beautiful symphony orchestra mixed with male and female players. Instantly, the term I use is global music, because whenever they call world music, they think it is anything but classical music. So I started the term global music in the 70s just to make people understand, you know, global music. Under that, we have Indian classical, Western classical in India, North, South, traditional Chinese music, different kinds of traditional music. Whenever they say world music, they say world music, everything but classical. So I used to say whatever piece I'm writing is a global form of music, global music. So we played in Oman. It was a huge success. Okay. So, good. You will hear the Achuthsankar first bridge, what we were talking about. You can play it now. Thanks.
Very strange question to be asked.
40 40 years at that time.
Musically, far more than that, I would say. It's a strange experience to be not seeing what is going on there and listening. And I would say, if somebody says L. Subramaniam with L. Shankar playing Mohanam, and say, if we sit here, we wouldn't know that Ehudi Menuhin is playing. You know, the confluence has been seamless, I would say.
I think if you hear closely, the Menuhin's ornamentation is not Indian.
Oh,
It is a vibrato.
vibrato.
A Western tradition of playing completely Western ornamentation. I was playing completely Indian ornamentation. So that then we were playing in different octaves also. I was playing in one octave, he was playing in another octave. So it is totally written for a Western violinist interpretation. But the next bridge, I like to also see about the orchestra. We were talking about the orchestra. The orchestral, when you write with the orchestra, it's another big tension because everything, you have to write every note. They don't improvise. You have to write every note. And then for our Indian artists who are playing with me, they don't write down anything because they're all used to listening, memorizing, and playing with the main artist, improvising. So there is a very delicate balance one has to do, guiding our accompanists once you play with the orchestra and also guiding the conductor when you finish your improvisation. There's a short clipping of the Fantasy on Vedic Chants, which originally was written for Maestro Mehta, New York Philharmonic, for India Festival. This is done with the London Symphony in London. I like just to play that segment, so you know the full orchestra playing the global music.
You made a very interesting remark just now. You said you have to guide the conductor of the orchestra. Would you agree that the Indian composer actually is not very selfish, if I could say so? A part of the creativity, that means the scope for improvisation, is left to the singer or the performer. Whereas the great Western composers, very great, but they have taken all the creativity for themselves. They've set everything in place, and it is craft that matters for the performer. Whereas in Indian music, the performer has a creative role. Would you agree to that?
Yes, to some point, because earlier, before Mendelssohn, many of the orchestral violin solo pieces, they were open space for the soloists to play whatever they want. So whenever they called a great violinist or any piano player, they gave a space for them to improvise. But subsequently from Mendelssohn time, during Bach time, Mozart time, a lot of improvisation was there. After Mendelssohn concerto, he started writing everything for the soloist so that he wanted every note what is written to be played by the soloist, not something improvised. So it was there earlier, then it disappeared. So what I have done, our music is improvisation is a very, very important thing. So I have sections of different kinds of improvisations where we improvise. Then I end of the improvisation, because improvisation we cannot say this is the phrase I'm going to play and finish. So we improvise. At the end, I will indicate to the conductor, so he can bring in the orchestra, the loop, instead of stopping and restarting. So a lot of ideas interchange, eye contact between conductor and our own persons. So when the orchestra comes in, our people have to take a back seat and let them play. So the coordination is needed. So fortunately, when you write a piece and when you also play the piece, you're right in the center, you can guide them. If you're on the other side, you can't do anything.
We started late, but we have to give audience also a chance to ask questions. I will wind up with one last question from my side and maybe a couple of short questions from the audience. In your experience with interfacing with Western music, as far as rhythm is concerned, do you note that there is something special about the Tisra Nadai? Because the Indian composers who took a fancy to Western music seems to have registered that it is Tisra Nadai when you want to use straight notes. For example, Tyagaraja writing Varalila Gana Lola or Dikshidhar saying Shyamala Meenakshi, they are all in Tisra Nadai. Do you think that the Western audience are warm to Tisra Nadai because it's more suitable for their tap dance or something of that sort?
The Western system, there are different time signatures. They have used it from early time. One is 3/4 or 6/8. 6/8 is like almost like you can treat it like a Tisra Nadai. They very rarely use 5/4, like Misram, Sankirnam, and all those things. But Tisram, some of the compositions have been written by other people in that tempo without calling it Tisra Nadai. But when you play with the Western trained musicians, whatever you write, a trained musician can play. That is an advantage of, because of the technique and training. If you write something with a major orchestra, you write it, you rehearse with them, they play 5, 7, whatever you want.
I think our time is running out. We have a couple of questions from the audience. If you would wish to make it very brief, make it very brief. You can.
First of all, I would like to congratulate the interviewer, Achuthsankar sir, for scripting such a wonderful questionnaire. Sir, my question to you is whether music or violin as a creativity trigger, because I have gathered that Einstein used to play violin in between his theory of relativity. So violin or any instrument or music altogether, whether it is a creativity trigger or not, that is the question.
Music as such, what do we do in music? Basically take a 5-note or 7-note raga and play for 45 minutes and 1 hour. So it is the combination of different notes and changing variation of the dynamics. Otherwise, if you repeat the same phrase, everybody will get bored. So music is itself is a spontaneous creativity. So playing a particular instrument, you have to master the instrument to be free, to be able to play whatever you want. Music is one of the most important things for creativity.
Over to you.
Your son, Ambi Lakshman. Tell me, Ambi Lakshman, your son. Tell me some words of Ambi Lakshman.
My son is Ambi Subramaniam. He also plays the violin. My father, Lakshmi Narayana, we have given his name, Lakshmi Narayana is full name. As you know, in our tradition, we give my father's name, we give to one of these children. So I trained him and he has been playing very successfully, playing a lot of solo. We just played in London Barbican a few days back. That is his profession. I'm very happy, even though he did his MBA, then did PhD in music. Him and my daughter, who also did a PhD in music, she's a lawyer, Bindu Subramaniam, and my granddaughter Mahati, they're all into music. Thanks to my father, we want to continue that legacy.
We also have here the great Kavita Krishnamurthy, who complements musical life of Dr. L. Subramaniam. One more question and we close. Yes, please.
Sir, I think you have played in world stages, but definitely you started with the Carnatic or the background. But there is quite a lot of difference which the comparer asked between Western and Indian. But what do you enjoy most when you play pure Carnatic or with a bit of Western?
As a player, I love playing my violin. So whatever it is. As a composer, lately in the last, from 2000, in the last almost 25 years, I had the great pleasure of composing for Kavita and the big symphony orchestra and the choir. We have done Mahatma Symphony, Bharat Symphony, where it is like huge, about 100-piece members and Kavita singing in Sanskrit, original slokas and things like that. As a composer, I have done a lot of big major orchestral things. I enjoy that as a composer. Playing alone violin at home, I enjoy the most.
I think we'll close here. I spoke to M. Jayachandran, music director, just before coming over here, and we exchanged the joy of listening to you, playing with your brothers, the Viriboni Varnam, the triple violin, and how many hearts have been warmed, how many hearts have been elated with the profound impact of this music, which is actually as colorful as a rainbow because it has imbibed from different cultures of music, and it has made our life richer. I thank you, and I am very glad that I had an opportunity to speak to a person like you on behalf of this festival, and I thank the organizers also for giving me an opportunity to interview you. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again. About the Nair, that particular violin trio, I just want to mention, it was played with the greatest Mridangam player, Palkat Nair, who is from Kerala. So subsequently we did a lot of things with him.
What was that experience? You were very young and you got Palakkad Nair to play with you.
At that time, Nair was in the peak and he was like a lion, when he walked on the stage. People respected him so much. We were very young and we were surprised he agreed to record. Then subsequently, he's responsible for me to take up my music completely because I finished my medical college, became a doctor. Then he said, you should do this because you can change the world by playing this. I said, Mama, who is going to call me? Who is going to play? He said, no, I'll play with you. We will record a lot. So we recorded Varnam in 15 speeds, 13 speeds. Whatever I wanted, he sat and recorded for me. So I'm very, very grateful to Palkat Nair, who is from Palkat, Kerala.